Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to content-based attacks on stores, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, besties, it's 10:30 sharp. Time to get started. So looking around the room, I feel like I know many of you, but for those who I haven't met, I am Philomena Polifrone, she, her. I am the Associate Director of American Booksellers for Free Expression, which is ABA's Free Expression Initiative. And this is the first of two workshops that I'm doing this Winter Institute. The next is tomorrow, same time, same place. See you here. Tomorrow's is about legislative advocacy, how to testify for or against state legislation, and how to use your voices as booksellers to help move that needle. Today's is about content-based attacks on stores. I'll explain a little bit more about what that means in a second. But first, I want to do some housekeeping. First, I said this to some of you already, but for those of you who weren't here, there are some resources in the back table for you on your way out. There is a sticker with the hotline for American Booksellers for Free Expression. That goes directly to me. I do direct support for stores all the time. That is the source of the information in this presentation, is that direct support. So you can reach me. That is always top priority for me when someone reaches out. There's also my card, and there's also a counter card to tell your customers about the Credit Card Competition Act. One other thing I want to mention, the slides for this presentation are available through your app, and there is a slide later on at the end of the presentation with some resources that I'll refer to throughout the presentation, where you can find links to some of the resources that we've put together so that you can access this information when you need it and not have to rely on your notes from this session. And also, this session, as well as a ton of the other content I do, is available on the Booked podcast. That's, if you just search Booked, get it? It's a pun. ABA, it should come up. All right. Oh, no, sorry, one more boring thing. I have to read the antitrust guidelines. It's boring but important. Booksellers are encouraged to share ideas and support during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits us from discussing price or pricing policies, boycotts, or dividing up the market. If you have questions about that, you can see our full antitrust guidelines on BookWeb, or go to the advocacy desk and ask Dave Grogan about it. He loves to talk about the Sherman Antitrust Act. Isn't that right, Ray? He does. Okay, so what are we doing here today? As I said, I do direct support for stores all the time. Someone will email me. Some of you in this room have emailed me and said, our store is going through this. We've been targeted in this way. We're experiencing something that goes beyond just someone not liking a book that we carry and into harassment. There's really no harassment, intimidation, threats. There's really no other word for it. And if you don't know where that line is, you can always get in touch with me and ask. And sometimes I'll say, like, yeah, they have a bad opinion, but it's an opinion, right? Or it's an opinion that you might not agree with, but they're just expressing it. When it crosses the line is when it's impacting the mental health of you, your community, or your staff, or when it's in some way threatening your ability to do business. And what's happened here is that over the past, really for decades, the culture wars have been spilling over into books and into bookstores, right? This is not new. It's been going on as long as there have been bookstores. And even actually before there were bookstores. But over the past, let's say since 2020, 2021, as we all know, the volume in that has been turned up. And the attacks, and I say attacks quite deliberately, the attacks on schools and libraries have started to spill over into bookstores because people think, because I can go to my school board or my library board and I can challenge a certain book, then I can also go into my bookstore and challenge the books. It's not true. They can't. If you take one thing away from the session, let it be that no one but you can tell you what to sell or what not to sell, period. You can quote me on that. You can send them. No, actually, don't send them to me. Send them somewhere else. Send them to Barnes & Noble. But over the past 1.5 years that I've been doing this work, I have seen stores shut down by protests that turn really ugly, that prevent stores from doing business, that involve employees, staff members, owners being threatened with things that no one should have to hear. We've seen online harassment reach unacceptable levels, impacting the mental health and well-being of staff and store owners and social media managers. We've seen bomb threats, vandalism, theft, and destruction of property. And there's no silver bullet for this, right? I'm not going to tell you the one thing that you can do to make sure this never happens to you or to fix it when it does happen. But there are best practices that I'm gleaning from what has worked and what hasn't worked in the people that I've been working with. And what the goal here essentially is to keep things contained, let it blow over, and try not to make any unforced errors that is going to elevate this beyond where it is already. Oops, I went the wrong way. So here's the structure of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about 3 principles for keeping things contained and relatively manageable as it can be. And then I'm going to present 3 case studies. Or if you'd like, story time, because I'm not trying to air out anyone's dirty laundry in public. I am not going to talk about any specific things that have happened to any specific stores. Instead, I've taken some of the trends and I've put them together into 3 different sort of paradigms of the ways that things can get messy with 3 different paradigms of stores. And those stores are, I've sort of created these case study stores based on their approach to free expression. The first is the opinionated generalist, which is it's a general interest bookstore, but they have lines and principles about what they do and don't carry that are based on their principles and beliefs, right? And compare that to the all sides of the issue store, case study number 3, which is any given political topic like that, we're going to try to carry all sides of that issue within reason. So these are 2 completely legitimate approaches, but they're different approaches. And then in the middle, there's what I'm referring to as the activist bookstore. That's a bookstore that has a mission whose curation is, maybe it's based on we carry LGBTQ plus books. Maybe it's we focus on Black books. Maybe it's we focus on books by marginalized groups. Maybe it's we're a conservative bookstore, right? It can be whatever that mission is, that guides the curation. And each of these stores are going to have slightly different ways that they approach to someone coming in and trying to tell them what to carry or what not to carry. And one last note on tone, especially as we get into the case studies. This is heavy stuff. Part of the way I deal with it is I bring some levity to it, some humor to it when I can. Please don't confuse that for me not taking it seriously. Anyone who's worked with me on these issues knows how seriously I take it. Okay, but we'll try to have some fun in the moments when we can. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 principles. 3 principles I'm going to talk about. Number 1, keep it online or keep it offline. Try to stop it from being online and offline at the same time, because that's when it blows up. 2, create a pressure valve. I think that's a pressure valve. I don't, it's a metaphor I like to use a lot, but I mean, I don't want to shock anyone, but I'm not a plumber. And 3, prioritize staff safety, but I should really say prioritize the safety of the store, staff, community, team members, everyone who is touched by your store, because safety takes a lot of different forms. So let's talk about the first of these principles. Keeping it online or keeping it offline and trying to stop it from being both places at the same time. So don't get it twisted. Messes can happen offline, messes can happen online. Both can do different kinds of harm. But the real messes happen when it's both at the same time and when they're feeding each other. So in the internet, as we all know, lets things scale. It allows this sort of viral spread to make something so it seems like suddenly everyone has heard what is going on all at once. And pile-ons can happen really quickly. Many of you have experienced this. In-person crises can be more disruptive, and online crises can be disruptive, right? They can do harm. But when it's in person, that's when we're talking about bomb threats. That's when we're talking about protests where people can potentially be hurt, or you can be forced to close your doors. What we want to avoid is something where the in-person harm is combining with that internet's capacity to scale things. And so it's getting out of control and really, really impactful. So example, let's say that you have an online outrage situation, right? That turns into a real life protest or a bomb threat, as I said. Or conversely, if something is offline, primarily a disgruntled customer, you want to avoid a situation where you're encouraging or otherwise sort of doing things that will make it more likely that that customer goes online and starts trying to gather a crowd to themselves. And so the basic principle here is that keeping it on one modality will either limit the scale or limit the extent to which it can impact you. So let's talk about keeping something online when it's online only. What you're trying to do here is to avoid that online pile-on turning into people showing up at the store. The basic principle there is that online outrage can only hurt so much, but I also don't want to minimize the harm that can do. That really impacts the psychological well-being of staff and your community who are coming to your page and seeing all this hateful stuff in the comments, right? And for those of you who've experienced this, I hope you have ways to take care of yourself. Take that seriously. If we're trying to keep something online and prevent it from turning into people showing up at the store, what we essentially have to do is try to limit that viral spread. There are a few really basic things that you can do. You can control the comments, shares, visibility. You can limit the virality by controlling all of those things in the settings on the post. Comments are troll food. Comments is what they show up at the site, hoping they can do their horrible little dance and show off to their horrible little friends, right? If you're closing down the comments, there's no stage for them. You're taking the oxygen away. Shares are the viral spread that lets something go exponential. It's where with 2 clicks, I can take something that I'm mad about, share something, say, shut down this store, protest at 3:00 Tuesday, right? This is how something grows and grows and grows and grows, and it grows exponentially. I included press on here. I can understand that if you're dealing with some kind of online outrage like this and press reaches out, you're going to want to make sure that they hear your side of the story, right? That makes sense. But here's the thing. Even with a well-meaning reporter, they're not necessarily going to control the headline or the final framing of the story. And so suddenly a story that you see as local bookstore attacked by bigots can then be framed as local bookstore protested for selling pornography to children, right? You're not selling pornography to children, but people don't read the article. Famously, internet, you've heard of it. People don't really behave well there. So just be very cautious with press. Think about who you're talking to, do some research to sort of figure out who it is who's the platform. And ultimately, if you don't need to talk to the press and you don't know why you're doing it, I would urge caution. And so with all of these things, what we're trying to do, and in terms of not engaging, not wading into the comments yourself, that's the worst thing you can do because that's what they want to happen, right? They're trying to get a response. Don't give it to them. We're trying to be absolute killjoys here and just stop this from being fun. So if something is offline and you want to keep it offline, there's nothing you can do really to stop someone from posting about something. But certain behaviors that you bring into those in-store interactions that you train your staff with can help, again, making it less fun for it to circulate online. You can build on your community relationships in person, right? If it's a customer who's upset about something you have some rapport with, you can talk to them and they're much more likely to listen to you when you say like, hey, I can understand that you don't like this. Let me help you find something that you might like better. Or we don't carry that book, but here are some other stores in town that might, you can go talk to them. Again, if they're really annoying, send them to Barnes and Noble. Don't send them to your fellow indies. But you can essentially build on that rapport to talk to them. Again, famously online, people don't really do that. People don't really listen. Training staff with talking points, that is a gift. That is not only preventing a staff member from potential, like especially if it's someone who's inexperienced or easily flustered, not only are you preventing someone from putting their foot in their mouth, but you're preventing them from potentially being exposed online, because you need to assume that all interactions are being recorded. And we've seen situations where a staff member says something that maybe is not the perfect articulation of it, that is recorded and circulates online. And then that person's personal information is being shared all over the internet. That's what you want to avoid. And when you train staff to deal with this, or train your colleagues to deal with this, or just practice with your colleagues, or practice yourself at home in front of the mirror, what you're doing is making it less likely that that situation comes up. And we have some resources that are at the end of this presentation on some principles that you can train staff with, but a few of the basics. You'll want to train them to call experienced backup, lean on the principle of curation, defend the principle of what, however it is you guide what you carry or don't carry in your store, rather than the book itself. That can be really hard. I understand that. Some of these books are books that you're passionate about and want to defend. But defending the principle is a lot less likely to give someone a soundbite that they can take out of context and circulate online. That's the reason for that. And then we can also use some of the pressure valves that I'll talk about in the next principle to just try to cool people off a little bit. Final point here. When someone is talking crap in the town square, of course you want to respond. Of course you want to make a statement. You want to explain everything that is going on. It might not be a good idea. If it's not online yet and you make a statement on social media, or you reach out to the press, or you make some other kind of post, or send something about it in your newsletter, when you get that email of someone saying, what we've been dealing with is unacceptable and we won't stand for it, what's the first thing you do? You try to figure out what happened, right? I mean, we all love some tea. Me most of all. So that all that's doing is spreading the word and creating an asset that can be shared virally. Don't give them that. If you need to, if it's a situation where it's already out of control and you think a statement will bring the temperature down, think about what exactly you want from that statement and how exactly it's circulating. Okay. And by the way, you can always reach out to me to help figure out if it's time for a statement, and I'm happy to work on a statement with you. So next principle, pressure valve. People need to feel heard, and they need to feel like they're doing something. I realize that we don't think of it this way all the time, but just because we don't agree with the principles that someone is acting from, they're still acting from principle. To them, they're trying to do something that is good, right? And if you are trying to do something that's good, you're not going to stop doing it until you feel like you've started to achieve what you want to achieve. They're the same way. So we need to sort of create some pathway to have that feeling of being heard and having done something without capitulating and without pulling books from your shelves. So that's what these pressure valves are, essentially. Oh, wrong way. So here's one that's really easy. Give them a complaint form, right? This buys you time. If it's an inexperienced team member, it shifts the location of the responsibility to someone else. It lets you sort of cool down, think about how you want to respond. We have a template complaint form in some of the resources that are linked later in the presentation. So again, you can go home, download this, and then follow the links that way. You can also go to BookWeb and search for complaint form or search for curation challenge, and our resources will come up. The complainant in this case is going to feel like they've done something, right? They've written it out. It might not be the end of it, but again, at the very least, it buys you time. And hopefully that's going to be enough where someone feels like, okay, I've talked to the manager, right? That's Karen bait, right? That's what they want to do. You can give them that without capitulating. Similarly, I think, well, actually, I should say one thing you can have on the complaint form is a request for them to point to specific places in the book where there's something that they're concerned about. Say like, oh, I didn't realize that about this book. Can you show me where? And you have to be careful here because this can come off as a challenge. And it is a challenge, right? But that can potentially be a situation that escalates. The goal there is that someone is going to have to point to specific places in the book where they can say, when I say sexual content, this is what I'm concerned about, right? And sometimes they will have something to point to, and you will want to say like, okay, thanks, I'll talk to our team, and then I hear you, basically. But in some situations, they're going to go through and they're not going to want to say like, oh, well, I don't like that there's two men holding hands here. Sometimes they will say that, right? But sometimes that's going to put off some people who aren't going to say out loud that that's what they're objecting to. They just want to say sexual content without admitting that that's what they're objecting to. And I have seen that tactic dissuade people from their challenge entirely because they're like, well, okay, fine. And they leave it there. Another version of the complaint form is having a business card that goes to the owner, the book buyer, or some other designated person who deals with it. Again, talking to the manager. But you'd also don't need that to be someone's actual email address. I mean, it needs to be a functional email address, but it can be like essentially a de facto complaint line. A place where these things can accumulate, people can deal with them when cooler heads prevail. Finally, all of these things must be motivated by prioritizing the safety of you and your staff and your community, as I said. I want to reiterate that training staff is protecting them. I'm talking about practice. I'm talking about sampled language that people can use so they don't have to figure out how to articulate it themselves. Having a clear policy for your free expression principles, and we have some in the resources that are linked at the end of the presentation, a sort of starting point. I would encourage you make that a conversation with whoever in your store you want to be participating in that conversation. For some stores, that will be all staff. For some stores, it will just be leadership or the ownership team or whatever. But having those policies and principles lets someone say, this is our policy. I'm following the policy. If you disagree with the policy, here's a business card. You can talk to that person. Have a code word or a code phrase that people can use to call for backup if they're in a situation that they're worried is going to erupt, because these situations do erupt sometimes. I'm sure we've all dealt with some version of that. But having one code phrase that I know a lot of stores use is, can Sam come to the register, please? Or when there's no Sam who works in the store, right? So the name of a staff member who doesn't exist that everyone understands is a call for help. And finally, look into de-escalation training. Ironically, I wouldn't have planned it this way if I had not thought of it earlier. There is a de-escalation panel happening at the same time, but many of these panels are being recorded. And there is a panel from last year that is recorded that you can find on BookWeb. And there are many other de-escalation resources. I'm happy to talk to you about that in more detail later. Protecting staff, taking seriously the harm, especially that marginalized people have to go through when they're dealing with the hate that is directed at their community. It can be a lot. So take volunteers, let people opt in, but also use your judgment. If I'm saying, oh, I'm happy to deal with the social media, and you know that I'm going to go in there and tear things up and make it worse, you probably don't want me on social media, right? Just because I want to doesn't necessarily mean I'm the right person. At the same time, if you're saying, well, Philomena's level-headed, she can do it, but I haven't volunteered, and actually I'm really worried about how that's going to impact my mental health. I'm not necessarily going to say that if you're my boss, you should take volunteers, right? And that might mean that the owner of the store has to field some of that stuff. That might just be what it comes down to. But just being thoughtful about who's exposed to this and having the ability for people to swap out if they're doing that work and it's a lot harder than they expected. Having some way to kind of sub people out in that way is really, really important, because, there are things about this work that I didn't know the ways that they'd be difficult before I started doing it, right? Like you think it's going to be fine, and then you get in there and it's ugly, right? And I've been fine, but not everyone's going to be in that situation. The last thing I want to say is that you should restrict and sequester the harassment in the inbox or the voicemail, but hang on to it. You might need some of that, especially if it's threatening, for police reports or for anything else that you have to do down the line. And speaking of police reports, be thoughtful about police involvement. There are some situations where you will have to make a police report for insurance claims, for other things like that, where you need some kind of protection, or if you need to get in touch with them to say, there's been a bomb threat and we need someone to see if there's actually a bomb here, things like that, where it's actually unavoidable. If it's not unavoidable, I encourage you to consider avoiding it. Police do not make things safer. Police frequently make things actually more dangerous, specifically for marginalized communities. Check out don'tcallthepolice.com. They have region-specific alternatives to calling the police. There might not always be an alternative, but think ahead of time about what those resources are that you can use instead of calling the police when possible. And if you do need to make a police report, you don't need to have the police come to the store. You can go, you or someone from your staff who feels able to do this and feels up to it, can go to the precinct and make a report there rather than having the police come into your community. I already talked about being thoughtful about who's handling calls, social media. You can unplug the phone. That's the great thing about phones, or turn off the phone if it's a cell phone. Sometimes you might need to do that. Sometimes you might need to shut down the voicemail or just delete things automatically. But again, just be thoughtful about who is on the front lines there. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction again. That's what happened. I thought I just talked about that. All right, so now we're getting into story time. Are you ready? Great. So again, these are composites. They're based on things that have actually happened, but they're not, no one of these is any single store's situation. Case study 1, the opinionated general interest bookstore. Hugh, him, is a plucky young bookseller at an urban bookstore. It's a general interest store, but their policy is not to stock anything they find abhorrent. That means not carrying books they consider racist, LGBTQ+ phobic, misogynist, or fascist. Hugh likes that about his store. But one day, local provocateur Julia walks in. Julia grabs a book from a display on a hot-button political topic that has split opinion in the community. She asks Hugh, why are you selling this book? When Hugh gets flustered in that charming British way he does, Julia demands to know why they don't carry another book on the same topic by a well-known firebrand who takes the opposite position. Hugh feels backed into a corner, but he knows a thing or two about the book in question. He mounts a spirited defense of its central argument, growing increasingly impassioned. They go back and forth, getting increasingly heated, until Hugh finally has to ask Julia to leave. Little did Hugh know, Julia was recording the entire incident. The recording, edited to take certain comments out of context, is now circulating online with the store's name, address, and phone number. The post goes viral when it's shared by a popular political account online. Soon, the store is bombarded with calls, emails, and social media posts, and there's even threat of an organized protest. So, what could you have done differently? How could you have reacted differently when this happened? Go ahead. Yeah, you can always do that. You can say, oh, we don't have it, but I can special order it. Sometimes you won't want to do that, depending on what the book is. And a lot of people have been getting calls about ordering Mein Kampf lately. It's clearly a harassment tactic. we can talk about that if that's happened to you. But sometimes you won't want to do that. Sometimes that's a good way to just say like, sure, here you go, be gone. Yes. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask people to speak into the microphone. Thank you. Oh yes, to repeat what was said. Asked to special order the book was what was said. Thank you. Any other thoughts? Anything Hugh could have done, or Hugh's store could have done? Go ahead. Go ahead. Ray said he wants to get his steps in, so.
If you do have a policy written out that your employee knows about why you carry certain books and why you don't, just have them read that statement instead of getting into the big defense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to train my employees not to get into the argument.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can even just say, oh, here's our policy. Our buyer followed this policy. And you can say like, and if they continue to push, you can do that. That's great. Go ahead.
One thing we've done is we've brought a lot of these books into our POS system and zero them. So then our staff can just say to the customer, we're out of it. And then they are protected and they don't get that harassment.
Yeah. The only thing I want to
actually in the system.
It's great. And the only thing I want to say about that is that you never quite know what someone's intention is. So if that turns into them thinking, well, they do carry this book actually, then that could, if they're coming from a different direction than you think they are, that could backfire. But in general, I really like it. Just think about if there are certain books that you don't want to do that with, keep that in mind.
This seems like a perfect situation for the form. Mm-hmm. And in our store, we actually made it neutral. It's not a complaint form. It's a curation input form.
I like
which
that.
Really de-escalates it even further.
Yeah, because with the complaint form and, with all of this, really, there's a chance that we're actually legitimizing the principle, right? That we're actually giving the impression that someone does have say in what you curate, right? So it could just be like, oh, we have a feedback form, right? This online form that doesn't go anywhere and doesn't work. No, don't do that. That'll probably make it worse. Okay, one more and then we'll move on.
I know with our store too, we have a policy of like, if it gets to that, we'll kind of bore them with bookstore lingo. Mm-hmm. So be like, oh yeah, we have like many books on our shelves. Sometimes we can't fit them all. Like, here's kind of the process of how we order them. And they just kind of get bored and they'll walk away. So.
That reminds me of a great story that I heard from Charlie, who's here, which was someone called Charlie's Queer Bookstore and said, do you carry kids' books? And it's like, yeah. And they're like, well, you're indoctrinating children. And the person misunderstood and said, okay, indoctrinating children. Let me see if we have that. So, Charlie, you gave me permission to use that story. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on for the sake of time. Hugh could have been trained. Hugh could have been trained to give Julia the owner's card or complaint form, refer Julia to the store's curation policy. Got those two. Nice. The collective quiz is going well. Use de-escalation principles instead of escalating and Hugh could still defend the book while using de-escalation principles, right? But Hugh likes to get angry. We all know he has an anger problem, right? he's making it worse. With more training, he could figure out how to not make it worse. Go ahead. Wait for the microphone, please.
I just wanted to say one thing about de-escalation specifically. We've noticed that like body language is huge.
Huge.
Yeah. So like when people say something that they want to enrage you and you're shelving a book, just be like, oh, crazy. Keep shelving your book.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm not going to quote these off the top of my head and potentially get it wrong, but there are a lot of things about body language, tone of voice, and also just positioning to keep yourself safe. This is a situation where Hugh might be the only one in the store. I'm trying to remember the movie. I think he was the only one in the store. But there are situations where maybe you want to be close to a window so that you're more visible from the street or something like that. You could have asked Julia to point out specific examples in the book, like, oh, what do you find offensive here? Because I didn't order this book. Tell me about it. He could suggest another book or send him to send Julia down the street to Barnes and Noble back there. Right? Ray, could you send the microphone over there, please?
I am a big proponent of fake employees. Sheila does all of our ordering. So I'm not entirely sure why we don't have it, but I will absolutely write that down for her. And actually, can I grab your contact info? And then, maybe if Sheila has something, then she can reach out and yeah, there you go. Let Sheila handle it.
Yes. Would you like to be on record with this opinion? Here you go. That's part of the other logic of putting it in writing, right? Not only do they have to articulate their complaint and potentially realize why it's not a great complaint, but they are also putting in writing, going on record. And, these days, this day and age, especially in the past month, we know so many people have been emboldened in doing that. But for some people, that will still potentially put them off. I should also say that the other thing you could have done is assume he was being recorded, and he might have, again, not escalated, chosen to engage differently. But given that he's already recorded, given that it's already out there, he could request the post be taken down. He could limit who can comment on the post or who can tag the store. And he can be thoughtful in assigning staff or rather the owner of the store can be thoughtful in assigning staff to monitoring phones, email, and social media. In this case, you can probably handle it, but maybe not, right? Maybe he's very fragile. Maybe he's very sensitive. It's possible. Okay, but regardless, the store should think hard before posting about it, let it blow over, and don't remove the book. The give a mouse a cookie principle applies. I have seen situations where someone does remove the book, and then before you know it, they've gone elsewhere in the store and found other books to object to and said, oh, that worked. Let's see if we can get all these other books taken down too. So if we have time for case study 3, which we may not, we can talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so here's the denouement. I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to give you an ending to the story, of course. Hugh's commitment and his store's curation principles remain the same. Versions of the incident, as he comes to call it, recur sporadically, especially when there are major political flashpoints. But that taste of how things can spiral out of control helps Hugh think strategically when he recognizes he's being baited. That's what we want, right? Case study 2, the activist bookstore. Meg, they, owns and operates a queer feminist bookstore in a medium-sized city in a quote-unquote purple state. They have been in business for a few years, but recently have started holding story hours for LGBTQ+ families and allies, including drag story times. Ever since then, she's been getting some unwanted attention. Trolls have started review bombing the store, tanking their Google and Yelp ratings. Sometimes they leave anonymous 1-star reviews, and sometimes they rant about grooming and make false allegations about the purpose of the storytime events. Meg, at this point, can and should act fast. She can report review bombing to Google and Yelp. She can try getting an appointment with a sales rep and mention it. I've heard of this working. Shout out Judging by the Cover if you're in here. This was a tip from them, that if you get a sales appointment and say, yeah, I was thinking about taking out ads, but nothing is stopping this angry mob from tanking my review. So I'm not really that inclined to. And I've heard of sales reps actually being able to take those reviews down. That doesn't mean you have to buy ads. You can be manipulative. I give you permission. You can rally your supporters to offset some of those negative reviews. That's something Meg could do here. She could also check local Facebook groups or have people infiltrate local Facebook groups to see if she can figure out where it's circulating. Facebook is especially bad for this. The ability to have those private groups allows people to circulate in there, but it also means that it can be harder to find the source of where someone is posting your phone number. And in this situation, you can report it. I mean, we all know that Meta has pretty much given up on any content moderation, except for the kind that some of us might wish they would do. So reporting the post might not be worth it, but it takes a second. You can still have a bunch of people report, and you never know. Again, Meg should save every email or post that they're getting at this point. She can control the commenting and sharing to stop the spread. But Meg doesn't act fast, and the situation escalates. Trolls from all over begin piling on via phone, email, and social media. Someone spray paints a slur on the side of Meg's building. The messages start containing implied threats about the next Storytime event. In the morning of the event, Meg has to cancel and shut down the store when they receive a bomb threat. The situation only arose a couple days prior, but it's already out of control. At this point, when it's out of control and there's already been a bomb threat, what should Meg do? At this point, what should she do? Go ahead. Wait for the mic.
Because there's a bomb threat involved, I feel like there's no option, like you said, but to preferably send someone to a precinct to get the police involved to ensure staff safety, community safety.
Yeah, and this unfortunately is a situation where they'll probably have to come to make sure that there's not actually an explosive that has been placed. Again, you have to prioritize staff safety, even though these threats, to my knowledge, have never had an actual device placed somewhere. You can't take that chance. You just can't. And the same goes with other threats of violence and so forth. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say contact you.
Yeah.
ABFE.
Contact me. I would say call in the bomb squad first. It's not a service I offer happily. On the other side. Yeah. But also, if 3 years ago, you had told me that I would be like dealing with bomb threats, I'd be like, that's funny. I don't know who you're talking about, but it's not me. It's a lot. And that goes for so many of you who are doing this work and have been targeted as a result of it.
So after you call in the bomb squad, want to check in with your storyteller and communicate to your audiences, make sure they are okay, and confirm your commitment to safer programming in the future, and start planning your bomb threat management plan now for the next event.
And that good advice is directly from Drag Story Hour. Thank you for being here.
More of a next steps as opposed to in this moment. But when this happened to our store, we did end up hiring a security that was non-uniformed police, which is a choice every store can make. But we require RSVPs. This was for a book group, so it wasn't a ticketed event. So we required a pre-RSVP. No one was admitted at the door. And that name list was cross-referenced with our membership list and our previous customer list of people who had attended our book group before, to presume, that they were the same people that had been there before, and not, somebody new who was just coming to yell about whatever.
Yeah, that's a great point. Basic things like that, like requiring RSVPs, confirming identities, even being careful and judicious with how you circulate the specifics of the event. You can still get the word out to the people you want to get the word out to without making yourself quite that vulnerable. So a few other things. Meg can notify the police, the FBI. I realize that sounds clueless right now, the FBI, but for now we are still recommending it. And ABFE, me, of the bomb threat. Follow the CISA bomb threat checklist that is included in the resources at the end of the presentation. In this case, as you already said, certainly do have to notify the local police department, because they're the ones who are equipped to respond to it. And you also need to get in touch with them to say, when this type of situation is popping off, hands up who's aware of what swatting is. Yeah, it's extremely scary. It's when someone calls the SWAT team on a location that does not actually have an active emergency, in hopes of creating police violence, in hopes that the police will kill the person that they're swatting. It is terrifying. You can get in touch with the police department and say, we're being targeted in this way. we're concerned that we'll be swatted. Check with me if you get a call about this location to make sure that it is legit before you respond. They should know what swatting is. And again, Meg at this point going forward can defend the principles, show that care that Regan from Drag Story Hour was just talking about to the drag performer, to the organizers, to your community. You can stick to those principles while changing the way you do communication. Privilege, the forms of communication that go directly to your community, your newsletter, other places that you can post it other than social media, in store, other neighborhood outlets like that. Because what we're trying to do is prevent this random person from somewhere that is not in your community going down a list of keywords and finding stores that they can threaten with bomb threats. We have reason to believe that the last time there were a bunch of bomb threats to stores in close proximity, it looked like it was the same person or group of people, and they were probably just going through stores, sending bomb threats in that way. So that's what we're trying to avoid, right? And if you send things out only to people who have opted in, it prevents people from doing that. So Meg follows these steps. I cheated a little. This is from a different movie. Meg follows these steps. The situation doesn't disappear entirely. Hateful comments and emails still appear every once in a while, but it does become more manageable. She spreads word about the events through the newsletter, in-store communications, and neighborhood media that are harder for creeps hundreds of miles away to search online, but it does allow her to keep doing her work in her community. So as I suspected, I'm not going to have time for case study 3, but luckily the presentation is available online. I will just say, oh, sorry if you moved. No, I went the wrong way again. What is it? This is the All Sides of the Issues store. Jeffrey, he, him, is the owner of a large single location indie that's been in business since the 50s. This story is about Jeffrey removing the book that he's being asked to remove and that not solving the problem. That I'll jump right to the moral of the story there. Essentially, the situation is he ends up having protests and counter-protests and removing the book that then just inspires the people who are complaining in the first place to ask for more books being removed. We've talked about it already. Great news, though, eventually it does blow over. Again, it still comes up every once in a while, but there are just basic common sense practices that you can do to try to keep things contained. There's no silver bullet. The one thing I want you to remember is to stay calm, call us. I'm happy to talk about any step of this. This is the hotline number, which we've recently revived so that you can reach us. And you can also email abfi@bookweb.org. And if you have my contact information, you can also email me directly. Here are the resources that you can find when you download the presentation from the Institute app. And now I want to leave some time for Q&A. So if you have questions, wait for the microphone. Ray will come to you. And make sure to speak into the microphone so it can be recorded and so everyone can hear you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, this is happening to my store right now.
Okay.
Short story, gross guy wandering around our downtown area with a gross sign, trying to get people to engage, recording things, blah, blah, blah. About a month ago, some people in our staff felt threatened, tried to call our beat officer. He didn't answer, so they did call 911, which was a valid choice in the moment, and that is all fine. But I just want to share it to the point of to tell all of you that I did not know that 911 calls, that information is available via the Freedom of Information Act. So the person in question got that audio recording of the 911 call and put it online as part of their little YouTube video of them walking around our town in front of our store. Luckily, the name of the person who made the call and our store address or phone number, rather, not our address, was bleeped out. I don't know if that was by the police or by this person, but we have been receiving hateful calls and comments online since Sunday night. So I did not know that 911 calls are recorded. So I just kind of wanted to add that to your, like, think about calling the police first, because that information then just ends up adding fuel to the fire.
Thank you for that. That's extremely disturbing. Let's talk. And I think what I would add there is that in this situation, can think about a restraining order. If it's someone who is, I've given this advice to people recently. If it's someone who is harassing your staff and impacting your safety in a sustained way, talk about if a restraining order could be possible. You won't know unless you look into it. So it's worth looking into. Okay, other questions?
So one of the things that we've been dealing with on and off since at least 2020 is finding swastikas in books in our Black Studies, Queer Studies, and Holocaust Studies section in our store. And one of the challenges that I've been dealing with that, it's someone who has been coming back, or it's multiple people. We have no idea who they are. It would be impossible to find on a camera or anything. And I don't really know how to, I've really struggled with how to talk to staff about this. Usually we've discovered it when staff are shelving books. They happen to flip open a page and see that in there. And I also just really don't know what to do with the books either. I did try to bring this up once on an ABA online forum, and it turned into is Nazism MAGA thing. And I just have found it really difficult to have a productive conversation about this. So I was just curious if there was any advice you could give about that. Cause I don't even know what to do with the books. They're in a drawer in my desk because I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. I'm so sorry that's happening. It's not acceptable. It's not something that you or your staff or your community should have to deal with. It is, this is a situation where, one, I think that you can have a sign that says that there are cameras without actually having cameras. You do, damn it. Okay, yeah. So make that as widely known as possible. I think in this case, in terms of what to do with the books, I think that the best thing that you can do is to just keep reordering them. I know that is a financial cost, but showing that you can't be intimidated out of carrying certain books is the best way to again, just make this seem like it's not worth the time. That's also something where you can potentially call in your community in certain ways that aren't going to make you more of a target, like through your newsletter, to say, hey, this keeps happening. We're making a fund so that we can replace these books and so that they can't actually reduce our stock, right? That's a way that you can defray the financial cost of dealing with this. But yeah, in terms of what to do with the books, it's very rare that I say this, but I think you can destroy them, or take out the pages, get rid of them some way.
So I'm from an activist store, and we actually have experienced attacks from people who I think are self-identified liberals. So not right-wing folks. We certainly got those. We actually know how to handle the right-wing folks. It's folks who perceive themselves to be good, decent liberals and centrists, and a lot of it is around this idea of free speech, and that they want their definition of free speech is different than ours, and this free expression thing. And so I keep getting stuck on I'm one of those people that didn't talk to the press and then got my picture in the paper around an issue, and basically just had to let it ride and be defamed, right, because of a position that my store took. I'm curious around how we articulate as a leftist bookstore, this is our position. We do take sides. Mm-hmm. We are unambiguous about a lot of things. And we don't believe in book bans, right? Because people are accusing us of silencing certain positions, right? They're like, well, this is a complex issue, and there should be multiple points of view here, and you have a responsibility to do this. And I'm like, no, we don't. Actually, we don't.
That's correct.
Right. But it's hard because these are not people that want to ban books. They don't want to, they're not the sort of typical stereotypical quote unquote enemies that we're talking about. They're not quote unquote MAGA people. And so the nuance there is hard. And so we are perceived as the book banners, or the people who hate free speech. And, and so I'm just having a hard time with that.
Yeah, 100%. The bane of my existence is that Nobody understands what the First Amendment is and is not. You're from Charis Books, right? Yeah. Much as I wish it was, Charis Books is not a government. Every institution, every store, every private institution gets to decide whether they want to, and to what extent they want to, reflect a public forum in their store. Curation is the bookseller's speech. Your right to curate and to create a selection is the free expression issue that is that you can emphasize here. The other thing that I wish people understood is that censorship is not just about restraint on speech, it's also about compelled speech. And we're seeing this in really terrifying and dramatic ways right now, right? No one can tell you to carry something that you don't want to carry any more than they can tell you not to carry something. They're different sides of the same coin. So I think that there's an opportunity there to do a little bit of First Amendment education. The First Amendment, especially I think among progressive circles, has pretty bad PR, but actually it's the thing that is allowing us to stop book ban laws from being implemented right now. It's something that does protect you. It does not force you to carry books that you don't want to carry. It protects you from having to say things that you don't want to say. It does not force you to say things that you don't want to say. So no one can tell you what to say any more than they can tell you what not to say. We can talk more about this. It's a really, really sticky issue. But I think more kind of education there about what it means is the way to go. Jessica, or go ahead and read here.
Hi, Copperfield's Books. I just want to respond also to the issue of having swastikas and hate speech put in books. We have several stores, and in a couple of our stores, we've had swastikas and other anti-trans, anti-queer, and anti-Jewish, anti-Black cards and tracts and things hidden in some of our stores. We did have to put cameras in. We did move some of our sections to make them more visible, more upfront, so that they could be more closely monitored by staff. It has helped. But some of the things we've done is reach out to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Mm-hmm. They track different areas around the country where hate speech has been showing up, and they also track what different organizations are actually active hate groups versus sort of passive, pathetic. They're all pathetic. Like less active, less dangerous hate groups, and they sort of will maybe also put your mind and hearts at ease if they say they're really just not an active hate group, maybe since the 80s, and they're just floundering. And it really put my team's heart at ease to realize that there's this group that's leading these tracks haven't been actually active in California ever. So that really just kind of put our team at ease in that way. Also reaching out to the Anti-Defamation League, even though they're really not doing enough. And the ACLU, just reaching out for information from them. That's been really helpful to just give us information on how to address it with our teams, to do some of the sort of decompression work around it, because it is scary. Because hate speech is terrifying. Also, I don't know what states you're in. Obviously, we're in lots of different states, but in California, we do have really good and robust anti-hate laws, and so just reaching out to your state's different organizations around that has been really helpful around some of that work.
Yeah, so +1 for the Southern Poverty Law Center. You can report directly to the Southern Poverty Law Center. With the Anti-Defamation League, I would just say look into them a little bit before you reach out to them. You'll want to understand more about them before following that advice. But Southern Poverty Law Center, 100%.
Hi, so we're a big event store, and we probably fall into the sort of like opinionated generalist category. But the issue that's come up for us is protests at events. And honestly, from like a variety of ideological perspectives, it's like sometimes we're too leftist and sometimes we're not leftist enough. And people are mad about it. And it's less about safety and bomb threats, and it's more about somebody or a group of people wanting to like shout down the author and, totally disrupt the event. So it's like, you're already on site, you're in a room full of people, the authors are on stage, like totally freaking out. So I'm curious if there are best practices either for sort of like preventative measures for events or for like in the moment, how do you sort of like redirect? How do you sort of like salvage what you can of that conversation? Because it's really, there's nothing more tempting to a troublemaker than like a past mic at a Q&A. So how do you sort of like prevent them from shutting down the conversation?
Yeah. So could someone kill Jessica's mic, please? No, just kidding. Thank you for the question, Jessica. But that is an example of something that you can do. You can have a symbol. You can have someone to be ready to cut the mic if you think it's a situation where it might go there. And again, I realize that some people would see a certain irony in me, a free expression advocate, telling you to cut someone's mic. But here's the thing. It's your platform. It's your platform. Freedom of speech does not mean that everyone gets to have every platform all of the time. And it doesn't mean that you have to allow events in your store that will be perceived as your speech that you don't want there. It's yours, right? You control it. I would say there are resources as well on the resources slide here. In the Right to Read Toolkit, which is free online for bookstores, elaborates on all of this. There are some interviews and how-tos there specifically about event safety. One thing that I would add is that in the Q&A session, there are basically there are different ways to take questions, to deal with questions, to essentially give yourself more control if you need to pull the plug in that way.
Ray is telling me I have a second.
Okay.
Okay. What happened to the Doc Bookshop? And we get it all the time. And in 16 years, the sheriff has reached out to us on one occasion where we were a target where they were using a mail system and they were sending books to us laced with fentanyl. And they asked, yes, it was a terrible, terrible situation. And other things that have happened, and the city has put a police storefront right catty corner to our store where you look out, you see that. So the city has gotten involved once we've told them some of the things that was happening at the Doc Bookshop, and they really love our space and some of the programming that they do that we do. But attacks come everywhere, and through the mail, in person. They got this big old thing, this laughing emojis. So if we're doing like History Month, Juneteenth, or any type of celebration, it's always constant attack. So I'm just happy that I have more information on this. This is why I really came and sat in the session, because it's getting more direct and in your face and direct emails that we always have to send that to our police department.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk after. I'm so sorry that that's happening. That's the first time that I've heard of that specifically. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that and figuring out what the best practices are. So let's talk. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!